Welcome back to Biblical Greek. In today's lesson, we're going to continue the first part of English grammar. Now, the reason we're going over English grammar is because sometimes when we are facing categories in Greek grammar, it seems so overwhelming. And so what I have done here is I've gone back to the book that I went through in my seminary days, Elements of New Testament Greek by J.W. Wenham. He was a British scholar, and in his textbook, the first chapter is Introduction to English Grammar. So I've taken his categories and kind of summarized them and added a few things that I felt were important. But keep in mind, our textbook for the class is Learn to Read New Testament Greek, 3rd edition by Dr. David Allen Black. So continuing from lesson 1, last time we stopped at inflection. Now, inflection with nouns, pronouns, adjectives, verbs, and some adverbs, they all go through a change. In a way, we call that, morphology. And every word has a stem, and then there is a prefix or a suffix added to that stem, and the word changes based on whether it's functioning as a first person or a second person or third person, or functioning in singular or plural. There's a change because of number, the change because of gender. So masculine, feminine, and neuter. And if you remember, we talked about that. In English, masculine, feminine is based more on the sex, but in Greek, it is based on the form of the word. So, for example, bread is masculine, head is feminine, and then a child is neuter. And so the form of that word changes. Same word, but now it takes on a different prefix, suffix, and some changes that come to that word. Then change because of case. Let's talk about that now in this part. What is that? What is a case? Case is that form of a noun or a pronoun that shows its relation to other words in the sentence. There are 5 cases, and let me quickly write those on the board for you, and you can probably see those in the PowerPoint as well. The first case is the nominative case. The nominative case. What is a nominative case? A nominative case refers to the subject of the verb or the complement to an intransitive verb. For example, in nominative case, the catcher missed the baseball. The catcher is in the nominative case, the subject of the verb missed. Another example of a nominative case, let me put that down over here, is Steve is a mechanic in Raleigh. Both Steve and mechanic are in the nominative case. Okay? So keep that in mind. John the Baptist was fasting. John and Baptist are both in the nominative case. So, it refers to the subject of the verb, or in intransitive verbs, it can also be the complement of the verb. The next is vocative. The second case is vocative. That's more like exclamation or just an interjection or hailing somebody. Master, I am coming. Master is vocative. Okay, vocative. So, Kyrie, Lord, is vocative. Lord, save me. Lord is in the vocative. Lord, comma, save me. The third case is the accusative case. Accusative case. And if you know your English grammar, by the way, this is not a grammar course or an English grammar course. This is just to kind of brush up your knowledge of English grammar. So I really encourage you, if you struggle in English grammar, to buy a book that kind of explains the English grammar categories that will help you when you study Greek grammar. That was a big help to me, is to just be able to look at the parts of speech and to look at what is a case and what are the different forms of the verbs and those kind of things, and participles and infinitives and gerunds. It helped me a lot, okay? So this is not a course in English grammar, but just a kind of a brush up. But if you knew this, if you were well versed in English grammar, this is typically called an objective case. Objective case. But in Greek grammar studies, we usually don't say objective, we talk about the accusative. What is the accusative case? It is the direct object of the transitive verb or indirect objects and objects of preposition. But there's a little bit of qualification that I'm going to explain in just a moment. Direct object of the transitive verb. My dog buried her bone. Bone is a direct object, accusative. Bone would be in the accusative case. Jack gave Jill a gift. In that case, gift is a direct object, accusative, and Jill is an indirect object, also accusative. Okay? John's excuse for his behavior or excuses for his behavior are irrelevant. Excuse, object of the preposition, also in the accusative case. Okay? So if you have trouble with this, just kind of brush up in English grammar. Ask me if you like, and I'll give you more examples. But really, our focus is on the Greek grammar, okay? But this kind of helps you understand what we're talking about when we do get to the cases in our Greek course. The fourth case is genitive. Genitive case. And again, if you already know your English grammar, it is probably, you probably remember it as the possessive case. The possessive case, okay? So, the apostle's brother. Apostles would be in the genitive or possessive. But keep in mind, in Greek, we will talk about genitive. We're not going to call it possessive. Or the brother of the apostle. Genitive case. In Greek, it's just one word. Just a word. We don't need of the. Just one word that's been inflected to reflect the genitive. The fifth case is known as dative. Dative case. Okay? It is the case of the indirect object. Now, remember I said something about it earlier in the accusative. The accusative is a direct object of the transitive, or the indirect object, or the object of the preposition. Well, in Greek grammar, there's also a dative case that actually handles the indirect object. Instead of falling under accusative, it is its own category, which is dative. So example, giving my cat a bath is an unpleasant task. Now, I know, it's kind of tough when you think about grammar. It's like, oh, I remember those days in high school or or in freshman comp trying to understand what is the indirect object. The indirect object, okay, let's talk about the direct object is bath. Direct object is bath, is the target of giving. Giving is a gerund, a verbal noun, okay? So it's a verb that takes the place of a noun. So bath is a direct object, but cat is the indirect object. So giving my cat a bath is an unpleasant task. In this, cat is dative. Okay? So it's, in Greek, you will see that to or for something. Genitive would be of something. Dative would be to or for something. Accusative, again, is just the direct object. Vocative is hello, you just kind of calling on someone or pleading with someone. And nominative is the subject. Hopefully that's helping you some. One more example, just to clarify the dative. The owner gave the donkey to him. The owner gave the donkey to him. Or the owner gave him the donkey. In both cases, to him or him, dative. To and for something with the indirect object is in the dative case. So hopefully that kind of gives you a brush up. But again, keep in mind, this is not a full-fledged English grammar course. I'm not going to spend too much time here because we have a lot to cover in Greek. But hopefully this helps you some. And again, get a textbook from Barnes & Nobles or Amazon somewhere. And if you have any questions, do let me know. There's so many books out there on English grammar that can be of great benefit to kind of brush up or even learn so that you can understand Greek grammar better. So we talked about change, inflection because of number, right? Singular, plural. Then we talked about change because of gender, masculine, feminine, neuter. Then we talked about change because of case, nominative, vocative, accusative, genitive, plural, or dative. But now there's another change because of verb, okay? What is that case? So what is that change? Think about for a moment. I lose. Okay, so I lose. First person, singular. You, let's see. You lose. Okay, again, second person, singular. He, she, it lose or loses would be third person, singular. On the other side, we lose, first person, plural. You, plural, lose, or if you're from the South, you can say y'all lose would be second person, plural, or they lose, third person, plural. So again, in English, we see so many words have to be put together, but in Greek, it's just one word that gets inflected. There's a change in that verb, and you go from first singular, or you can go to second singular, or third singular, or first plural, second plural, third plural. There's also another way that there's an inflection. Sometimes, and I think I've already covered here, this would be singular. This is plural. Okay, covered that already. But then there's also change because of tense. Tense, past, present, future. Same thing in Greek. I will lose would become future. I loosed would be past. I lose would be present. Same thing with the rest of them. And again, that's an inflection in Greek. It changes that form of that word, and this can, with just a minute change, can go from he loses to he loosed. That would be past. Or he will lose. That is future. Or they lose. That is present. We're talking about tenses right now. They loosed would be past tense. they will lose future tense. And again, that's changed because of inflection. There's also another change because of the voice. Okay? You probably have heard of the two, active and passive. Active voice, where the subject is doing the action. Passive voice, when the action is being done to the subject. But in Greek, there's also a middle voice. Now, you will see me talk about that in the future. I don't want to get bogged down here in talking about this. But in Greek, middle voice was often said to be the subject is doing the action to himself, kind of reflexive. But what we found, and this has been coming for almost 100 years now, that's not really true. The middle voice is not necessarily reflexive. It's not like a middle ground between active and passive. So active example would be they loose the colt. Active voice. The colt is loosed by them. Passive voice. Middle voice is not something in the middle. I don't know what it would be. The colt loosed himself, I guess. But middle voice, we'll talk about this, is when the subject does something that is advantageous to himself or herself. Or the subject does something more actively, and so the middle voice communicates that. We'll come to all that down the road. But just keep in mind, in Greek, there's active, passive, and middle voice. 3 voices. Okay? The fourth thing, another thing, we're past the fourth, but is the mood. The mood. What is the mood? The mood is the mode or the manner in which the action is to be regarded. 4. Okay? The first mood is the indicative mood. The indicative mood. Example, he goes. It's making a statement. He goes. That is in the indicative mood. It can also be a question. A question like, were you listening? That is in the indicative mood. Okay? That's the first one. The second one is imperative. Okay? Imperative. What is imperative? Imperative is a command, or a plea, or an exhortation. So, go. Just that word, go, is a sentence. It's an imperative. It's an imperative. Make haste. You're asking somebody to do something. Make haste. That is in the imperative mood. It's not a statement. It's not a question. Are you making haste? Well, then it'll be indicative. Let him come. Let him come. Imperative. Okay? So that's the second mood. The third one is what's known as the subjunctive. The subjunctive mood. What is a subjunctive mood? It's a thought or a wish. It's not a direct statement. It's not a command or a plea. But it's a wish. It hasn't actually happened. It's wishful thinking. So, God saved the king would be subjunctive. I mean, you're not saying God saved the king or God is saving the king, then that would probably fall under indicative. Okay? If I were to say, God saved the king, then it would be imperative. Subjunctive is the way we typically think about that. God save the queen or God save the king. It's more a wish. Another example, thy will be done. We're not telling God, you better do your will. Then it'd probably be an imperative. Thy will be done. It's a wish in prayer. If I were you, I would go. Is that a direct statement? Like indicative? No. If I were you, I would go. That's not a command either. If I were you, I would go, which means you still have a choice whether you will go or not. Falls under subjunctive. Think about the word subjective. It's kind of subjective. Another example is, I shall be at home, which is indicative, versus I should be at home. That would be subjunctive. I shall be at home means there's definite proof that I will be at home. I should be at home. Subjunctive, which means this, may or may not, but there's a good possibility, but may or may not. So there you have subjunctive. Finally, the fourth mood is what's known as the infinitive. The infinitive. What is the infinitive? Infinitive is a verbal noun. Infinitive is a verbal noun. You say, wait a minute. Now, if you know your English grammar, you say, isn't that what the gerund is? Right, good point. But let me explain to you the difference between an infinitive and a gerund. An infinitive has the word to attached to it. To go, to come, to read, to write, to eat. A gerund has the words or the letters ing attached to that verb. Going, coming, eating, sitting, drinking. You see that? Both are verbal nouns, but infinitives have to in the verb. Gerunds have the verb with an ing. Of course, there's an inflection there. So giving is not G-I-V-E-I-N-G. Giving becomes, or to give, or the word give becomes G-I-V-I-N-G as a gerund. But as an infinitive, it remains as to give, just in English. Okay? Gerunds are often used when actions are fixed, real, or completed. Gerunds, which is the verb with the inflection and ing attached, are often used when the action is fixed, real, or completed. For example, I enjoy cooking. Okay? So cooking. It's a gerund. Enjoy, that's you're making a statement that you really do that. You have a feeling of joy when you cook. Excitement when you're cooking something. Infinitives are often used when actions are unreal, abstract, or future. For example, he wants to cook. He wants to cook. Is he going to cook? We don't know. I think he wants to, if we let him. But it's not definite. It's not fixed, and it's not real. It's not completed. So keep that in mind, and if you have any questions, watch this video again and again. And of course, as I mentioned to you, get a general reference grammar and find these words time to time. When you get bogged down and you're reading, studying the Greek textbook, and you go, infinitive. What is an infinitive? Well, go back, look at that English reference grammar, and see some examples, and it'll help you. It'll help you so much. And of course, you can always ask me. So, another example, a difference between a gerund and an infinitive. Both are verbal nouns, verbs that take the form of a noun. He wanted to sit. To sit is infinitive. He can sit. He can sit. Well, the word sit is functioning as an infinitive there as well. So, the last one, participle. Verbal adjective. Gerunds, infinitives, verbal nouns. Participle, verbal adjectives. Being verbs, they have tense and voice. So let me erase that here. I don't want you to get confused with this, because we're talking about participles, not moods now. So being verbs, they have tense and they have voice, and they may have an object. But being an adjective, they can qualify nouns. And this is where a lot of students, when they're studying Greek grammar, they're tempted to check out, because that word participle seems so intimidating. Participles. I don't know if I can. I was doing great when we were talking about cases, and I was doing great when we talked about verbs and moods. But then we got to infinitives. I think I was still in there. But participles, oh, that's just too much. It's not. It's a verbal adjective. For example, loving is an active participle, verbal adjective, loving. Loved is also a participle. Again, verbs, but functioning as an adjective because they're verb, action word, but they're qualifying a noun. So he's a loving parent. Or, he was loved, something like that. Passive participle. And there are some other things that we don't have time to get into these 2 short lessons on English grammar, just to brush up your grammar so you can better understand Greek grammar. Some things that we may maybe cover more later on are like simple and complex sentences, noun, adjective, and adverb clauses, but we will come to that later in the class. But I hope this has been helpful to you to watch these 2 lessons on basic English grammar that is to help you study and understand Greek grammar. Thank you for watching this one.